Hello, I'm Noir Nerd, and in this video I thought I'd talk a little bit about, not going into details, but talk about my current roles. I work remote, primarily in two developer roles, so I wanted to talk a little bit about getting to the stage where you can work remotely as a developer. Talk about a little bit about my experience of how I got to that point as a developer, how I got to the point of being able to work two remote roles as my main, and how that has been my main income. And also just generally wax a bit lyrical about my experience of freelancing, offer some perspective, some tips, some stories from the past, good and bad, mostly good to be honest, but I have had some negative experiences as a freelancer as well. But yeah, so I guess onwards with the video. So I'll give a bit of context and background to my current work. So I'm sort of like a full stack developer, I guess, in some respects, but mostly front end focused. So my main stack is still HTML, CSS, JavaScript, obviously very JavaScript heavy in React. Very focused on React mostly at the minute presently. So I'm mostly a React developer at the minute, React JavaScript developer who does React. On the side I like doing a lot of A-Frame, a lot of WebGL, JavaScript programming and Free.js, but that's sort of just in my own time. I've never really done that still a thing professionally. Though I was introduced to Free.js in a previous role, but that's another story. So I work for two organisations. I'm not going to give names and go into details because I don't think that's probably appropriate. But I work for a games company who make a very interesting, basically a building game with artistic elements, and I work as a front end developer for that. Sort of the only front end developer actually for that. For like an art repository site that we have as part of the game, because the game features a lot of art, thousands and thousands and thousands of artworks. The game also allows people to upload their own artwork, so I was part of the team that's involved in that. And the other organisation I work for is a cybersecurity sort of startup, and we've been working for I think almost 2 years now on basically a risk assessment tool. But again, I can't really go into details about it too much. But yeah, basically it's like a sort of auditing tool with a lot of features. It's like a dashboard tool essentially, but quite high end. So how did I get to that position? Well, I've been a developer for quite a long time now. So I've graduated university. So I studied at university. I studied at college, IT. I didn't do A levels. I just went straight into IT in college. Did sort of okay, not brilliantly. It's just like sort of just above average really for the college course. Then I went on to study at university doing applied computing in Manchester when I used to live there or near there. From there I got like first jobs just like IT support roles. In the first IT support role I did, I worked on creating an accessibility friendly website for disability charity. So my first job was doing IT support for a disability charity. So I was heavily focused on creating it was just a static site at the time with HTML and CSS, like hand coded HTML and CSS. This is a long time ago now. It's 2009 maybe. I didn't really know what I was doing that much. Apart from obviously from what I learned in university, I was still quite a beginner. So yeah, I created this site. Then after that, I just took on lots of different projects. One of the first projects I took on was a museum project. It was just a WordPress site, but I was creating a child theme. I did that for free as a volunteer for a month. Got it up and running. I had to do a bit of PHP editing as well. Nothing too strenuous, but that can be a good thing to do actually if you want to just get a first project. If you're just like really a newbie, I'm not talking if you're an established developer, but if you're really just wanting to get into it, is maybe take on one voluntary project or two. I wouldn't say do it as a rule though after that fact, but I found it quite useful just to do this one voluntary project. I was there for a month, just in every few days a week. It got something into my portfolio, and it was a useful experience as well because I had to sort of get used to measuring business requirements and how to meet those requirements with a web solution. So that's quite useful because I was the only real developer working on it. I think there's one other person, but they were just like the general IT person. They weren't really specifically focused on the web side of things. So that's quite useful. But like I said, I am stressing only when you start out. Do not work for free. If you've been a developer for 3 or 4 years, don't do that because you'll get taken advantage of course. So yeah, and then I worked in a few different branches. I did some support work in IT. I did a bit of e-learning development actually for a time. I worked with e-learning software like Storyline and Articulate. Essentially PowerPoint extensions, but Storyline's a whole different beast now. But I did that for a while, so looking a bit of Moodle LMS as well, learning management system. Got a good range of skills. I got my first job in London doing that actually, so I was basically an e-learning developer. We had to develop a bunch of I was an intern actually, so it was for 3 months, my first role. So I wasn't paid a great deal, but it helped me get my foot in the door. And I think what helped me secure that role actually was just having a decent portfolio, and also the interview I prepped quite well for it, I suppose. Obviously that goes without saying, but yeah. So obviously if you're going into development, a lot of the actual assessment depends on the strength of your portfolio, because there's going to be developers who are actually reviewing your portfolio for a job role if you've got through that initial sort of requirements checking part. So you want to make sure it's strong. You want to have a variety of projects. If you're a full stack developer, obviously you want a bit of back end, a bit of front end focused projects, and vice versa. If you're back end focused, you want it to be mostly back end focused, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, if you have a broad range of projects and you've got a healthy GitHub repository, that's always good. Like I've got I think 70 plus projects on my GitHub, not all of which are complete, not all of which are really, some of which are tests, some of which are examples, but if you sort of demonstrate that you're involved in a sort of community beyond just yourself, that's probably useful as well. Like I think that's a really useful thing to do. Like I write for an online magazine as well called iCodey, tutorials every few months, so I found that extraordinarily useful to do that, because A, it helps keep me on my toes doing new things. B, it helps spread some of the knowledge that I have. C, it sort of tests yourself as well, so sometimes you can get a bit rusty on things sometimes, so if you haven't covered something for a while, it can help just sort of clearing the cobwebs in your head about how to implement a certain feature or whatever in, whether it be JavaScript or whatever language you're doing something in. So yeah, what else can I say? So I mean, it's taken me quite a while. It's taken me 10 years to get to the point where I can work remote, but I think the nature of work's changing quite a lot now. So obviously a lot more roles will be offered remotely now because of COVID, but I sort of fell on my feet with both the remote roles. So with the cybersecurity one, essentially that was working for someone who I'd done some work with before previously and a few years ago, and they had this idea of developing this application, and it started off as an experiment. So I was just experimenting. I was the only developer when it started off, and got it to a state where it's prototypal, and then we got another developer on board, and it's sort of just gone on from there. It's basically done now actually. So that was quite a decent role to have. Can be quite hard work at times, even though sometimes roles are remote, there is of course still a lot of work involved. when you got to get something up and deployed, or you've got to get something running or something bug fixed, you still got deadlines to meet. So it's not like you can just start work at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and just slack off at 4. It's not at all like that, believe me. You still have to do deployments, you still have to do bug checks. It's not like, yeah, it's not like a slack off. And then the second role, which is the games dev role, is like, I was sort of, well, basically just through a friend, I've met the CEO, and he just sort of got offered the role after a while. So that's sort of networking, I suppose, in some respects. Networking, like I said, going back to like networking, just in meeting people out in the wild can be a real help, because you always know what the latest roles are. Like I'm in a group called Speak Plus Plus in Russia, where I live now, and it's basically an English-speaking group for developers in Moscow. I just gave away where I live now, didn't I? Doesn't matter. I don't think anyone's gonna hunt me down. And basically, that sort of networking is good, because there's always people saying, you know, there's this role available here. It can be very useful to do that side of things. Like, if you're not that social, maybe it's a bit difficult, but it's actually quite worthwhile. So I guess this console.vlog has been a bit of a mix of me talking about anecdotal stuff from my past and general advice, but I hope this is useful in some respect as to how some methods I've found that have helped me get to the point of working remote as a developer. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think it's been 12 minutes. Like and subscribe if you like the content. Bye.